I found myself saying negative things about some of the other players. And I was like, oh my gosh, these are little girls. This is horrible. You are no better than those parents talking smack to your daughter on the sidelines. Hi, I'm Jen.
Hey, I'm Suzanne.
Hey, friend. Today we are talking about youth sports.
Do, do, do.
So this one's going to be a vulnerable one for me. So my daughter plays youth sports. My son plays youth sports. They've played competitive, rec, all the things. And I used to think to myself when I would hear like the parents on the sidelines and, they'd say terrible things like take her out and, like, what are you doing? Get your head in the game. And I mean, obviously worse stuff than that. And then you'd always hear them like when you're walking out of the game, they're like, you embarrassed me. You didn't play well today. What were you thinking? Like just such negativity. And my little judgy self would think, oh, I'm so glad I'm not like those parents. I am so not like that. And, I
Thank
would just
goodness.
march out on my little way. And I know your kids play sports.
Yes.
Do you?
Yes,
Same.
and I still remember it from when I played also,
Yeah.
all the lovely parent comments as well. But yes, for my own kids
Yeah.
as well.
It's so funny because I don't remember. I mean, I remember our parents' comments, but I don't remember other parents' comments. I
Oh,
think I think we might need to unpack that on another episode. But
for
anywho,
sure.
um, so I have just come to realize that youth sports are all about parents, whether
Hmm.
it's rec or competitive. Because one day I was driving home, had my daughter in the car, and I was just full of all this emotion. And I was always full of emotion after the games. And we are not playing World Cup, people. And I was like almost baiting her with questions like, well, like the coach would say, maybe she didn't have a good game or she didn't get play time or whatever, right? There was like the actions of the game. And so I would think I was being positive and just, talking about the game. But the reality was there was like so much venom. And I would be like, the coach doesn't know what he's talking about. And what was happening out there? Like, did you feel like you played good? I mean, just full setup questions.
So do you feel like you were doing that because you wanted to get it out of your system? Like all the uncomfortableness you were feeling? Or did you
Yes.
really want to tell her that you felt like she hadn't played well and all the things that had gone on?
So, yes and no. So, yes, I now realize I was just trying to get all of that energy out. And no, I didn't want to tell her what she did wrong because I actually wanted to build her up. But I think because of all my negativity, it was like not received that way. So I can say, like, you did great and you had a bunch of good plays, and I would focus on the positive. But then the whole thing would just go down in negativity because, like, you didn't get enough playing time. And why is he putting you at that position? And why, it's just super negative. And it was so icky.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And I'm sure she responded super well to that.
yeah, I mean, she just didn't really say much, but I think she kind of got on like the negative bandwagon. And then when she was negative, I was like, why is she being so negative? Like, oh, I don't know, mom.
Mm.
Why?
Modeling,
Because she's trying
modeling.
to like, yeah, follow you. And there was one specific day in particular where there was just tons of stuff going on. And I had this epiphany and I called you. And I was like, oh my gosh. Turns out none of this is about my daughter. It's about me.
Again.
And you were like, how is it about you? And I said, oh, turns out I have a lot of unpacked stuff from when I played sports and all of those feelings of not being good enough, never playing enough, never playing good enough, never being top tier enough. all of that stuff that I never wanted her to feel. I was like somehow trying to not make her feel that by like talking negative about everything else, if that makes sense. Like almost justifying, like, don't feel like that because it's not about you, it's about everyone else. But when I was doing it, it was just not coming from a healthy place. And so it was just like a ton of toxicity. And I didn't even realize I had any leftover trauma drama from from back in the day, like 30 years ago. So,
Well, and friend, if you heard me go, that's the, mind blown, because I do remember when
yeah,
you called me and
yeah,
I was kind of on a similar path at the time, saying, like, why am I getting so mad? Like, where is this coming from? I don't
yeah.
understand, or just so emotional, not even mad sometimes, like so fired up. But I think my
Taking up
question,
rent in your
yes,
head for like
yes,
all week over
yes.
youth sports.
So my question would be, because I think this is how we help the other moms out there. How, like, what was it that caused you that day, if you can recall, to say, oh, maybe this is about me? Like, what internal talk did you notice? Or, like, what led you to that conclusion?
I found myself saying negative things about some of the other players, and I was like, oh my gosh, these are little girls. This is horrible. You are no better than those parents talking smack to your daughter on the sidelines. Just because you're saying it behind their back doesn't make it any better. And like, how dare I judge? Like, I mean, it was the amount of shame that came over me
Right.
was like, oh my gosh. And then from there, it was just this like unraveling when I started asking myself all these questions of like, oh, I'm just as bad as those other parents. I'm just doing it in the car and in my mind and all these other places. And I'm not building her up. I'm not making her resilient to youth sports. I'm not making her resilient to the fact that how much you play or how good you are at a sport has nothing to do with your identity or how much I love you. Like, it was this great opportunity to teach her resilience. And I was so caught up in myself. It was just, ugh. I mean, like, I could just, like, I still in my body, I'm like, oh, I can't believe I was like that for so many years.
Well, and I think what's super important is that we all have so much shame about these internal thoughts that we have no control over. Thoughts are going to come in our head, right?
Yeah,
Our job
for
is to
sure.
discover them. And so,
Yes.
one, I want to remind you, because we remind each other all the time, there is no shame in having the thoughts, right? And the
Yes.
fact that you're willing to look at them, give yourself a pat on the back, because most of us, we don't want to look at that. We don't want to admit to ourselves that we were thinking negative things, but we're never going to move past it without that. So I think you start, that's step one. And
For
then
sure.
two, I would ask you, once you had that shame, so I just want you to take us through it. So first you realize, like, oh my goodness, I'm speaking thinking these terrible things about other little girls who I
Yeah.
love, mind you, right? Because we
By the
love
way, yes.
generally, and I know how nicely
Yes.
you speak about all of her teammates. And so
Yes.
it's, you recognize the irrationality of it right there.
So irrational.
And then you had, I'm assuming, from what you just said, the automatic shame.
For sure. For
Then what
sure.
did you do next? Like, what was that next part for you?
Well, I called you,
Standard, yes.
Obvi, and I told you, and it felt like almost like confession.
Yep.
But it just feels also good to be vulnerable with people. Like I say that jokingly, but you have to have a few people in your life that you can feel comfortable. And I actually told another soccer mom that I had this epiphany. I actually told a few people because it just felt better to say it, and I felt like I know other people are thinking this, and I had also talked with them and felt very shameful about how I had even spoke to them, but spoke to them about the situations and just the negativity. And I was like, I am perpetuating the negativity. And so once I realized I just didn't want to do that anymore, so it was twofold. There was the shame, but there was also the like, I don't want to be like this anymore. So
So
I
is that
really
this is
need,
your shift? This is when you
yeah,
said, I don't want to do this anymore. I know how
yeah,
this feels. I'm going to try something else out. So you've discovered it, you've
yeah.
shifted it, and then
It's
what did
like
you
a
do?
total waste of energy. So I was like, the shift is I'm not doing this anymore. And then I really dove into like my own issues and kind of unpacked that a little bit about not being enough and all of that, and kind of dumped all of the negative thoughts that ruminate up there. And then I do the whole thing like, what's true, what's not true. And it turns out like none of it was true. I mean,
Mm.
I know that as a grown adult now, all the
So
things
when
that
you
I
say
experienced.
you do the whole true, not true thing for our friend listening, what does that mean?
Oh, you write down all your thoughts, and then you can kind of, or you can list them, or you can in your head think them, and you say true or not true. So, um, if I'm not good enough, I'm not going to be loved. Not true. If I'm not good at a sport, I'm a loser. Not true. Right? So those are just kind of examples. You can do it with literally any of your inner child or self-talk.
Yep.
Um, so I did that, and then I was like, okay, now how do I want to show up for my daughter? What do I want to instill in her? How can I be helpful in a pretty much toxic situation? Because the other revelation I had was, oh, and now she's surrounded by people like me, the coaches, the kids, because the kids hear what the parents say in the closed doors, but at home, in the car. So all the parents are doing the same thing. The kids all think it's okay to talk smack about everyone. And it honestly is like this super toxic environment. So that was another revelation. So with all of that truth, then I was able to decide, okay, this is an opportunity to teach her about how I felt, what I had been doing. I apologized. I explained my very vulnerable self. I didn't justify. I explained where I was coming from, told her I was incredibly sorry. That's not how she's supposed to be being talked to, being treated, like experiencing all of that. Then we talked about how she actually felt in car rides home, about her sport. We just kind of dug into that. We did that for a few months. And then we came to a place of like, okay, she still wants to play. We're going to change our behavior. So we stopped with the smack talking. We only focused on, did she have effort? Did she have fun? And how did she feel about it?
Yeah.
And that was it. And I always made it a point to pick two things that I saw her do really well. So they're very specific. So I wasn't like, you did a good job.
And they're
That's not
truthful,
authentic.
right? They're
Truthful.
truthful. Yes.
Yeah. And
Which
so
kids
we used
know
to have,
lies. Kids know
yeah. And
lies.
yeah. So we started a game, and it was two things that I thought she did really well. And then she would have two things she thought she did really well and one thing she'd like to work on. Because the reality is, she's playing because she wants to get better, right? And so in this case, she was in a competitive situation by now. And so she wanted, so it's not to say like it's all fun and games and rainbows and
Sure.
sunshine and whatever. That's not what I'm trying to say. But it was like I was more calm. She was more calm. I had no more like crazy emotions running through me anymore. And then from there, as she got older, we have been able to really build up her resilience and have real conversations about what's going on and about how a lot of all that toxicity around her and people's reactions and people's negativity and mean girls and mean parents and mean coaches. Now we can talk about how that's their old stuff. That's their trauma and has nothing to do with her. And those are things that happen to them, and those are their insecurities. And it's really been actually a really powerful way to explain to her and have her live it real time with me being her mentor. Even though it sucks at times, it doesn't really, because she's like, "Oh, I can release this. This isn't mine to hold." So even if it hurts her feelings in the moment, there's like this release because she doesn't own that. She doesn't own their crazy. She doesn't own their opinions. Their opinions are none of her business.
And think of how much healthier, right?
Oh,
Like, this is the
so much
whole reason
healthier.
we're doing this is
Yes,
that you and I did this. We won't, what you won't do for yourself, you'll do for your kids, right?
for
And
sure.
so
For
getting
sure.
healthy and understanding yourself. And it started with you being willing to look at those thoughts that you had so much shame about, to slow it down and to look at it. And then you see this beautiful story unfold, and
Totally.
how actually you end up modeling and helping your daughter by telling her and apologizing and saying, my gosh, I'm so sorry. But it all started with discovering those thoughts that were leading to that kind of behavior.
For
So,
sure.
I mean, that's what's
For
so
sure.
incredibly powerful about this. And friend, you're listening, and if you're wondering or thinking to yourself, oh, I'm not sure if that's for me, it's for you. It's for everyone. We all have those thoughts, and there's no shame needed anywhere. They're just our thoughts. And we're going here talking like nationally, possibly globally, about our inner thoughts. So
Yes.
you can do it, I promise.
Yes. Yes.
And there's a lot of reward on the other side.
For sure. I agree. I think the biggest thing, like the biggest takeaway was just not teaching our kids. Like, if all you take away from this episode is do not tie your kids' identity, approval, or tied to your love, please do not tie it to their performance in sports or their activity or their theater or whatever their thing is. Like, just think about it. I think that was what was huge for me. Because, I mean, trust me, we will have many more episodes on youth sports because the
Yes,
revelations that I have had, this is just one avenue of
for sure. For sure. And I think to the listener, the question is, are your insecurities showing up anywhere that you can think of recently with your kids or with a friend or someplace it's showing up where all of a sudden you're acting maybe a little bit differently or you're having a lot of emotion that doesn't necessarily fit there? So just take a look at it. Well, that's it for today.
hope you discovered something in my story.
See you next time. Same place, same sisterhood.